I position as a businessman who understands business that also podcasts. As a former park ranger, to look out, I see 700 park professionals out in front of me looking to me to have something to say to them because of a podcast I started 10 years ago.
Jody Maberry, a renowned business consultant, speaker, a business podcast host of The Jody Maberry Show.
Collaborated with some of the biggest industry leaders, established himself as a key influencer in the realms of marketing and personal development.
When you have a podcast and you have to show up every week with something to say, there's something special happens to you because you start to understand what you believe in, how to talk about it, how to phrase it. You just become so comfortable talking about your topic, what you're an expert in. That, to me, the best part about podcasting. It's allowed me to travel. My goodness, that couldn't have happened without a podcast.
The Content Capitalist Podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Content Capitalist Podcast. Today, my guest is somebody who's done a lot of things, but I'll just give a couple of highlights right here and I'll let him say the rest for himself. He used to be a park ranger, but he pivoted, and right now he's done so many podcasts. I don't think I've ever met anybody else, or at least had them on the show, who's done or produced more podcasts than Jody Maberry. Jody, welcome to the program.
Ken, it's so good to be here. I love talking about podcasting and all the business around it, so I know we're going to have a good time.
I believe it. Now, when I said that, I said, welcome to the program. That's actually the first time the word program came out of my mouth. Maybe I'm starting to feel all official because we've done enough of these, but I'm pretty sure you've done a lot more than most people listening. And I'd love to hear kind of about that journey. But before we do that, could you just give us like the elevator pitch? What do you do? Who do you help?
Well, now my main focus is I work with former executives who had a great career, perhaps decades long, and now they're on to what's next. And I help with that, what is next. So taking years, decades of great leadership and corporate experience and turning it into the right message, the right stories, and connect with people to help them learn or help them teach and build their legacy. So that's the main thing I do now, but it's been quite the journey to get here. And Ken mentioned that I've done a lot of podcasts. I have not added it up recently, but I've got to be closing in on, I'm somewhere between like 2,200 episodes and 2,500 episodes of all the shows I've done, hosted, produced. It's because I started my first show in 2014. And I'll just jump right into the journey on how that happened. I used to be a park ranger. And once I left that, I wanted to stay connected to parks without being a park ranger. And I discovered...
Which park was it, by the way?
I was here in Washington State. I was a state park ranger, law enforcement ranger at Riverside State Park and then Fort Flagler. So I live very close to Olympic National Park, which is very scenically beautiful. If you've ever been to Washington State, this is just one of the best places in a lot of tourist activity, big trees, mountains, all the things you love about Washington State are here.
So before we skip past this, because I'm all the way in Tokyo, right? And I don't think I've ever been to Washington State yet. I've been all over the US. So if I were to go there and visit a park, and let's say I've got 2 days, what are some highlights I should be looking for? Because you're a ranger, you're the expert, you know it better than anybody else listening to the show, probably.
Well, I'm glad you asked that. I'm so used to just jumping right into business talk or podcast talk, but there's nothing I like talking about better than parks and that sort. So if you were to come here, I assume you would fly into Seattle, and there is a great loop you can do from Seattle. Then you come out here to the Olympic Peninsula, and there you can visit Olympic National Park, which is one of the, I wouldn't say it's remote because it's not too far from Seattle, but it doesn't get a whole lot of visitors, and the interior has been left alone. So you can explore around the outside, but it's one of the few parks where the interior of the park is how it's always been naturally. And depending on what part you go to, this is a park that has mountains, it has some of the biggest, oldest trees in the country. It has rivers, glaciers, big elk. It's got otters, anything you want that it just represents the Pacific Northwest very well. So visit that park, visit Port Townsend, which is one of the most beautiful downtowns in the country. Then take the ferry to Whidbey Island, explore Deception Pass State Park, go up the other end of the island, and then back down to Seattle. In 2 days, you can just capture some really beautiful places just doing a loop from the Seattle airport and then back down through Seattle. So you can see some of the iconic places in Seattle too. The Space Needle, Pikes Peak Market, the first Starbucks, all of that's right there. So you can capture a lot of natural and architectural beauty on that trip.
Would I need to get like a 4x4, or would like a regular sedan do it for this loop that you're talking about?
Yeah, just a regular car, you'd be fine. No need for a 4x4. Unless you do some of the Forest Service roads, there's nothing extreme that would cause any need to use anything but a sedan. But there in the Olympic National Forest, there are some wonderful, fascinating hikes. Some of those roads, you might need a little more clearance, but it's easy to see a lot without going on those roads.
Well, thank you for that. Well, next time in the area, I'll just take what you told me. I'll send it to ChatGPT and say, please make an itinerary for me. And then and there's my plan all set out. So
there you go.
Spoken like an experienced park ranger. Thank you for the advice around that.
Yeah.
So you went from that to doing what you're doing now. That's quite a leap. Tell us about that.
All right. So there are two parts to the leap. I left being a park ranger, went back to school to get an MBA, was marketing director at a luxury home builder at the same time. And I started to miss parks, thinking, how can I stay involved with parks? And a friend of mine had started a podcast, Starve the Doubts. Jared Easley, he's a co-founder of Podcast Movement. He invited me to be a guest co-host on his podcast. After I did one episode, I said, that's it. That's how I can stay connected to parks with a podcast. I launched my first show, the Park Leader Show, which is still an ongoing show. I launched that this month in 2014. There's a 10-year celebration of that show. That led to my second show, is also launched in 2014 and is the most popular show I've ever worked on. It's called Creating Disney Magic, which I do with the retired executive vice president of Walt Disney World. That show led to other people reaching out saying, can you do for me what you do for Lee Cockerell, who I do Creating Disney Magic with? I went from one show to about 6 shows in just a few months. I think at my peak, I maybe had 9 or 10 shows going at the same time. Not quite as many, but that's where it all came about. After getting my MBA, I started my own business. It's created so many opportunities. It's introduced me to so many people, got me on stages and in front of people I never would have without a podcast.
Yeah, it does have that effect for sure.
Yeah.
When you said that that podcast you did started getting really popular, how do you define really popular in terms of podcast? And the reason I ask this is, people look at YouTube, Instagram, and all these other platforms where you can see the count right there. How many subscribers? How many views does each one have? And podcast is a bit more opaque because you got the RSS feed and people are listening to it on different platforms. And then you got to compile that data. It's hard for me to find any kind of statistical standard where people can judge the popularity of a podcast. But how do you define that?
Well, I will tell you my favorite way. There are some ways on iTunes. Where do you rank? Whatever host you use, there are several good ones now. I've always used Libsyn, and numbers are one thing. Are they accurate? Are they not? I don't know. Maybe, but they give you a good ballpark. I always tell people numbers aren't as important. Don't worry about it. But what I like to judge the success of a podcast by is the feedback you get. What are people, when they reach out, what are they saying? How often do you hear from people? That's what I really like, is when I hear from other people, then the show is a success. And Creating Disney Magic, it's ranked in the top 100 shows in its niche, iTunes, or now Apple Podcast, since it came out. It's done really well there. But more importantly, we've heard from a lot of people consistently over the years. And it's had a lot of downloads. And according to Libsyn on the numbers, it's had more than 4 million, which is way more than all the other shows I've worked on. So number wise, it's done good. And feedback wise, it's done good. That, to me, that's the best part. When you hear from a lot of people, you're doing okay.
So 2 questions come out of that for me. Number one is, what do you think you did differently from all the other podcasters to have that level of success?
Well, I think a couple of things worked in our favor. One, Lee Cockerell was fairly popular already at the time. Really successful business book, Creating Magic. We have the name Disney in the title. That's always going to help. So those two kind of gave us a leg up that no other show I've worked on did. But then we looked at the format, and just because a format works for one show doesn't mean that's how every show should be. But this show is 15 minutes every week, narrowed in on only one topic. And it could be a very narrow topic. It usually isn't something broad. It's something that you can hear us talk about and then take action on it. And I think that has been one of the things people really like. 15 minutes, you get advice from a very high level executive, and then the show's over. We've always taken the approach that we want people wishing the episodes would be longer than the other way around. So I'm not lost on the fact that we have Lee Cockerell, and he was popular before the show started, and that certainly helped. And the word Disney always helps. I do think the format has also worked in our favor. It's short. We answer people's questions. We rarely ever have guests. In almost 500 episodes, I think we've had less than 10 guests on the show. So we've always known what the show is, who it's for, what it's about, and it's worked well for us. The other shows I've done, I've never tried to copy that. Now, one thing I have copied is what I like to call the host and star format. I don't consider Lee Cockerell the host of the show. The podcast is all about him, but it's my job as the host to continue to make Lee a star, to bring out that knowledge. I think that is a format that has worked well. If it was Lee himself, he may not get as deep into the topic if it was just a straight monologue, but having a host to prompt the star and encourage the star, provoke the star to talk more about a topic, I think that really helps. The conversational host and star format has worked really well.
Yeah, that brings up another question. But before I jump into it, the one I had from before is, what benefits in terms of business, in terms of, lives change, in terms of, personal notoriety, have you seen from the podcast so far? Or you could define it in any terms you like, really. But having a successful podcast from before you started it to where you are now, let's hear any specific benefits that you've seen.
I have 2 that come to mind right away. The first one has nothing to do with anyone else or how anyone would think, nothing to do with numbers, nothing to do with hearing from other people. When you have a podcast and you have to show up every week with something to say, there's something special happens to you because you start to understand what you believe in, how to talk about it, how to phrase it, you just become so comfortable talking about your topic or what you're an expert in. That, to me, the best part about podcasting. I've done so many episodes, and you don't even have to do as many as I have. Just the fact that you do a podcast and you show up every week with something to say, it will amaze you that it could be at a party, it could be on stage, it could be a guest on another podcast. That when people ask questions, how easy it just flows out because you've already talked about it. You understand what you believe and why you believe it and how to have that conversation. That's the best benefit that has come of it. The other one actually has come from the park leader show. So as a former park ranger, I've had a couple of really big honors that were a direct result of the Park Leader Show. One of them being in the United States. All 50 states have a state park system. All the park systems have a state park director. Once a year, they get together and have their own gathering, their own conference, the National Association of State Park Directors Conference. And in 2019, that was the first year I was invited to come and speak to all of the state park directors. As a former park ranger, that is a huge honor, which wouldn't have happened if I was still in uniform out working in a park. So that was really neat. I got invited back in 2023 to speak to the state park directors again. And then just this year, I was in Michigan to speak at their annual in-service training. So as a former park ranger, to look out and see 700 park professionals out in front of me, looking to me to have something to say to them because of a podcast I started 10 years ago. My goodness, that couldn't have happened without a podcast. It wouldn't have happened without a podcast. And yeah, I've had some other tremendous opportunities. It's allowed me to travel, get in front of some really impressive people. But as a former park ranger, those examples of getting in front of state park directors, speaking to 700 park professionals, those are the ones I love the best because it just wouldn't have happened without a podcast.
Got it. Now, hearing your story is amazing, and transitioning into what you're doing now, which is, helping executives or former executives figure out what's next. Is this a full-time business for you now, or are you doing multiple things and that's a side thing?
No, it's my main job is doing what I do now. Now that it does include, I do some marketing projects, consulting projects on the side that are not related to working with the executives, but it's my main thing, what I do. And it's another thing that came from podcasting because as Lee Cockrell and I started to build the podcast, we ended up doing courses. We did live events. We started the Cockrell Academy, which is a suite of courses about leadership, management, culture, customer service. And it started with the podcast, but through that allowed me to understand how this works, how to see someone that has had all this corporate experience. How do you take 40 years of being an expert in something and then make it where it's consumable to other people, where they can listen to it and learn from it?
Got it. So let's talk about what podcasters should be thinking about when they want to build their audience, they want to build their brand, but podcasting is not their main business. Like in your case, you use podcasting to get in front of the right people, to connect with the right people, and then you attract potential clients and prospects, right? But you've probably seen people do it wrong. You may have been listening to a podcast like, ugh, that kind of turns me off. I wish they would have said it like this or that. Any pointers you could give us around that?
Oh yeah, I've seen a lot of things work well. I've seen things not work well. And I think part of the way I don't want to say do it right because it's different for everybody. This is one of the great things about podcasting. There are no rules. There's some best practices that might work better than other ways to do it, but there are no rules. You do Ken, I'll do Jody. We'll have our own shows and it'll go fine. It's one of the wonderful things about podcasting. There are some things though that will work in your favor if you do them. Not trying to grow so big helps, I think. Even if your audience gets big, if you have the mindset that this is a small show, it's a small conversation, keeps the feel of the show right, the right way. I always approach these as I'm approaching this one, that as we're talking, there are 3 people here. There's me, there's Ken, there's one listener, and that's it. Even if 10,000 people listen, I'm only talking to 2 people, Ken and one listener. That's it. That's how I approach every show. Even if I'm hosting, if I'm a guest, that's it. And that's why sometimes you will notice that I stop talking to Ken and I start talking to you, because I know it is just the two of us that are here. And I mean, the three of us, there's two people with me. That's how I always approach it. So that is one. The other is that you can use a podcast to answer some of the questions that people have.
Jody, I love the analogy. Always keeping it personal, as if it's me, you, and one other person. Let's give that person a name. Help me out here. Is it a Rosie? Is it a Joe?
Well, Rosie came to mind first for you. Let's go with Rosie. That's a fun name.
Okay. So it's Ken, Jody, and Rosie. So when we're talking like this, like, do you have a persona that you give this third person, Rosie? Is she middle-aged? Is she, like, how detailed do you get in your mind when it comes to this idea of having just three people in the room?
So I personally I've never worked through giving that person details or anything. If I need to, I will think of someone specific. I'll just think of a person I know. But this is some advice I have given people that, well, for one, it feels really awkward to talk to someone who's not there. I've done it so much, I don't even think about it. I could have an entire conversation with the other person and completely ignore you, Ken, even though you're here and the other person's not. Some of it is from practice. But if you need to, cut out a picture from a magazine and just put it right next to your screen, right next to your camera, and look at them. And if I did that, I could look at Ken and I could look at this other photo that I put right next to my camera. And by doing that, I can talk to the two people at once. So I personally don't give the person details, but if it helps, I would certainly say do that.
Yeah. Do what works, right?
That's right.
Now, that was one of the tips you gave us, what you're doing differently. Is there anything else that you notice you're doing differently that people can pick up on in order to improve their podcast?
Well, the other thing that I would say is don't be afraid to niche down. Go very narrow on an episode. If there's questions that people ask you, do an episode about it. That helps in a couple of ways. One, it could help someone find you who's looking for an answer about that specifically. And two, if you're doing episodes that are just about a topic that you know you're an expert in, it helps get you in front of your customers or potential customers that are looking for that. And a good example for me on that was I did an episode about a topic that I thought, who's going to care? After I recorded it, I thought, who's going to care about this? I did a message. So if you call me on my phone, I have a unique voicemail, outgoing voice message, because if we've never met before and you call me on my phone, and I can't answer, I don't have the chance to make a good impression on you. So I use my outgoing voice message to make a good first impression on you when you call me and I can't answer. I did a whole podcast episode about that. After I recorded it, I thought, who's really going to care about an outgoing message? That's what the whole episode was about. This is going to be a flop. I've never had an episode that got so much feedback. People would send me emails and say, I listened to that episode and I changed my outgoing voice message. And people love it. And if people included their phone number when they sent me that, I would call and leave them a message so I could hear it. But it's just a good example of, if you do something very narrow, then it shows you know a lot about that and it can help people. So as an example, if at the top of this episode, Ken said, what would you recommend if I did a tour of the Northwest and I had 2 days? Okay, so you could do a whole episode about, here's what I would do in 2 days in the Northwest. Or you could do 14 episodes, each one about one different thing you could do. The audience will get more out of 14 specific episodes than one like listicle style episode. So that's another approach that I've learned works really well. Instead of just break it down and do an episode on each piece, instead of assembling the whole thing into one episode.
Okay, that works. I think that something that I've been trying lately that actually is working out quite well. And it's not on podcasts. I'm doing this between the shorts on like reels and stuff and on YouTube. Is I'm making these short 1 minute tutorials about home studios. Like, hey guys, here's how to find the right mic for your home studio. Here's how to pick the teleprompter. Here's how to frame your shot. Here's how to position your lights. And then I've done this twice so far, and the second one's just about to go out. But then those videos individually go really, really well for bringing people into Instagram and TikTok. But then I take all 7 of those because I shot them together and turn that into like a 7-chapter long form video that goes up to YouTube. So, like it's exactly what you said there. The long form has a certain audience, but it won't be as impactful as people who just want to solve that one problem or are more curious about that one detail that you could expand more and just focus directly on that. So I'm experiencing that on a different format, but I think it's 100% true.
Yeah, I like that, Ken, because you're right. Each of those 7 that you do will be exactly the answer someone is looking for. And sure, you'll get an audience for once you combine them all, but each one of those, you answered a very specific question that someone was looking for. So I'd love to hear that you're doing that.
Great. Jody, right now, do you consider yourself a podcaster, a business advisor, a consultant? Like, if you had to pick one title that kind of, like, if you could only pick one, then what would that be to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I would say I love podcasting. I've done, as we talked about earlier, I've done a lot of podcasting. I still rarely would introduce myself as a podcaster, though. I'm a businessman who happens to do a lot of podcasting as part of what I do. So if you were to ask, I usually would say I'm a business consultant or a business advisor to retired executives, but rarely will I introduce myself as a podcaster, even though that's what I've done the most. The reason I do it that way is that quite often the people that I work with are not looking for a podcaster to solve their problems. They're looking for a businessman that understands what they do to help solve their problems. It just so happens podcasting is a tool I use very often to advance the work that we're doing.
So maybe you could give me some advice around this, because I own a few companies. I've got the content creation agency called 20X Agency, where we do full service. We produce podcasts, we make short form video, long form video, and it's a B2B thing, right? That's one business. It's an agency. Then I've got another one, which is design and manufacturing. We do equipment, video and audio and lights and things like that. And then I've got this podcast. And I started this podcast because I got blue in the face from explaining a zillion times the answer to when people ask, how do I make money with this? Because it's a B2B thing. And then I thought, well, I'll just start interviewing my own clients who are doing $1 million or more. And I'll ask them, how are they doing it? And then now I've expanded it, opened it up to people who, on top of interviewing my clients, people who are not my clients. So that's what, the motive behind this is. And a lot of people are genuinely curious. How do business owners, legitimate business owners, make money? Or how does it make sense to invest in hiring someone to do this or help them? So in that case, instead of calling myself a podcaster, what would make more sense just in your opinion?
Well, it's great you're thinking about that. Just in the little bit that I heard you talk about it there, you're a few different things. You're a businessman in multiple businesses. So there's a good start. That's how I've used that as a way to relate to people, because yes, I was a park ranger. I was also a financial analyst. I have an MBA. So that I position as a businessman who understands business that also podcasts. But you also are a guide to many people. You're a content creator. So I would look for something in that area, that you are a successful business owner who uses a podcast to show how it works and to tell stories of yourself and others who have been successful. It's just podcast is one of your avenues for telling those stories. And also, having said that, I don't think twice or about anyone that would introduce themselves as a podcaster. I clearly love podcasting, as I'm sure you do too. It's just because of who I work with. That's why I don't introduce myself as a podcaster. I just happen to podcast an awful lot.
Yeah. I think that's it's a curse and blessing for the modern entrepreneur that there's very few that will just do one thing. You know,
Yeah, that's
there's
right.
very few that they can say, I'm just a podcaster, or I'm just a business consultant, or I'm just, whatever. We wear so many hats, right? So it's, we're designers, right? All of us, we're public personalities in a sense. We're business consultants. And I think it shifts so fast, and we're just willing to put on so many hats because it's available. And then the identity gets, what is our identity? And that's something that I think gets reinvented so often that maybe our brains are adjusting to that constant shift. So just a reflection of our modern times, I think.
Yeah, you're right on. And also it's because you do so much that allows you to be a great conversationalist like this, because you've been involved in so many things that you can talk to someone one day about manufacturing, and then the next day talk to a former park ranger, and then the next day talk to someone that does videos. So it's a curse in a sense that you and many of us are involved in so many things, but it also is a blessing in the sense that you can talk about anything. You know just enough. In some cases, you know a lot more, but in many topics, you know just enough to continue to dig deeper and have better conversations, which has led to a successful podcast too. So it all blends together like that.
Now that I have you calling this a successful podcast, I'll take it. Thank you very much. Let's jump a little bit into how you see things shifting and changing. AI is taking over more and more every single day of what content creation used to be in a very manual sense. And there are all kinds of things going on, like people like Arnold Schwarzenegger has his podcast, which is purely AI driven with his voice print and a copywriter. And he's not trying to hide that at all. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got the video side of things. ChatGPT just released Sora, and now videos could, Hollywood level. Well, I'd say it's just around the corner, getting to the point where it's 100% indistinguishable by the human eye, whether it's AI or video. And then, of course, there's been, deep fakes going on for a long time. You are probably using some kind of AI tools like, ChatGPT or Claude or Descript to, speed up the research and syndication or editing process. I've kind of, thrown everything at you right now, but what have you seen change, and how do you see this affecting what you do?
Well, in 2014, when I started, there was none of that. So it has been fun to watch it go from none of that to all of that. And there are so many options now. Here are the two things I think will matter with AI. The first is it makes what we do easier, because the steps that you don't want to do, you don't have to do. For example, if I am a guest that says a lot, now you can automatically get rid of those without sitting down to do it. Then you can use a product like CapShow and automatically have show notes. So the steps that were tedious now, AI is helping us with those, and I love it. The other thing that it's going to do is, as more and more content creators rely on AI to create their content, it makes what you and I do even better, in the sense that we are still just two guys, one in Tokyo, one in Seattle, having a conversation with each other, an honest to goodness conversation about what interests you. The conversation is not driven by AI. AI did not come up with your questions nor my answers. And the more AI generated content that's out there, it makes what you and I are doing right now more desirable. So my view of it is let the ones that want to cut the corners with AI do it. And I think there's a difference between using it as a tool and using it to cut corners. Let the ones that want to cut corners do it. You and I will still keep having conversations. And because others are cutting corners, it makes what we do more valuable.
Let me ask you a hypothetical question. This is just for fun. All right.
All
So
right.
don't take this too seriously. Let's say that someone introduces an AI model, which is a version of you that actually does it better than you. That means that they articulate their questions better, but with your personality. Like imagine like you have all the experience you have now, but your brain is running at 200% capacity. And when you see that, like just like we're having a call right now, but it's a better version of you, which what a lot of scientists would agree and is inevitable at some point. How would you react to seeing that?
Yeah, that is an interesting thought because we're heading there, right? We're heading there. So what do you do? Which becomes, and I don't know if I have an answer, but which is more attractive? And by attractive, I don't mean like physically attractive.
Jody, you are very attractive. I was just about to print out a poster of you.
So which is more attractive? The Jody Maberry that has little quirks, will mispronounce words, will say words, pronounce them because of the region I grew up in the United States, stumbles a bit. Is that more attractive, or the version that says words perfectly, comes up with brilliant questions immediately, answers questions precisely with an interesting story? I really don't know. Well, at that point, will the human Jody Maberry be more attractive because I feel a connection? I, as in a listener, feel a connection to that? Or will the AI generated Jody Maberry, who articulates and pronounces perfectly and has a witty comeback to every answer, even though you know it's all fake, is that more attractive? I really don't know. I don't know what I know what AI can do right now. What we are doing is more attractive because you can feel a connection to it. Once AI is perfect, is that more attractive? Maybe. I really don't know. I don't know. What's your opinion on that? Are people going to like the 200% AI Ken or the in-person Ken that I'm talking to?
I think there's two sides to it, and I didn't have this question planned when I came onto this interview with you. But as we're unpacking it, I think that one way to look at it is that the AI will get so good it can replicate all the foibles, the human foibles, the things that make us feel human. And then it will also be able to engineer the kind of disarming personality that we have, but just a little bit better. Just, having all the human research that's ever been done on Earth about psychology and using that to connect with the audience, where we have that innately, but they would have it digitally. So I don't think it would be the perfect Ken or the perfect Jody. I think it will be the most attractive. When I say attractive, I mean attractive in the sense that it's going to feel more human in some ways, which is a weird thing to say. On the other side, let's just say hypothetically it really did happen, and I'm having a talk. I would just be interviewing the heck out of the AI version of me to understand myself deeper. That's what I would be doing. And then that could be the show, like, hey, Ken, like, why do you think I reacted like that? Oh, I think that, like, great. How do you think I can turn that around? Like, I would use that as my sounding board because it has access to every single psychological study that's ever been done, every machine model that understands, mathematically why we do what we do and why we feel what we feel. And also inversely, how to turn that into a conversation that real humans would be interested in. And that version of me would be able to be just like what you said earlier about the host making you the star, right? So then what if your AI version is your host and you're the star, and then they just keep asking you the right questions with the right intonation in the right, timing to make you, the human, really shine? I think that's what I would do with that version of me if it existed.
All right, you opened up a can here that I know this probably isn't anywhere we were going to go.
Oh, but it's
Instead
fun,
of,
isn't it?
it is kind of fun, and I like the idea of not making it perfect, which made me think, okay, instead of a perfect kin, it's a perfected kin. It's kin, not perfect, but perfected as kin. So let's say you get the chance to interview the perfected kin, the AI kin that knows everything you've done and probably has figured out why you did it. I'm sure there's things about yourself you don't know, don't understand why you did it or what. Would you ask it those questions, or would you just leave it be and just not know?
That's interesting you asked that. And I would ask it. Here's what's happened is I hired a therapist not so long ago. And she was working through a lot of, stuff that I was going through at the time. And I started to better understand myself. And then I went and she suggested I study Carl Jung. You've probably heard of him, Swiss psychologist. And his work, I got pretty deep with that, read like 5 of his books. And then, one thing led to another. And then I realized that this therapist who has multiple degrees in psychology and, and theology in 5 different religions and everything, she didn't have as much information on her fingertips and the right read on what was going on based on everything I just studied. And then I went and started creating, and this is a personal side project, by the way, and I've never announced this publicly. Even my assistant who's listening in on this doesn't know this, but I started creating my own AI therapist. And I gave it all the information I possibly can about my life story, my history, my memories, my relationships. And boy, it is sharp. It is witty, and it is giving me better advice than my human therapist could. But the difference is it's in the form of text, and talking to a human is still nice. So once we could put a face on that, okay, this is starting to get kind of fun. I have to look up this reference, but they actually brought a bunch of active MDs, doctors in the US, people who are, in their 40s, which is kind of the peak, the prime of, mental and physical acuity, right? And they did a bunch of pop quizzes for these guys. Hey, ER patient comes in facing XXXX, these different symptoms, first reaction. And these doctors didn't have time to go look at references and stuff. They just had to take immediate action because it's an emergency, right? And they fed the exact same information to AI, and not even a specialized AI. This is just ChatGPT that's been programmed to behave as a doctor. And out of 50 scenarios, AI gave the better judgment 50 out of 50 times than the human, and faster. What medication, what's the read on the condition, what's the immediate action, 50 out of 50 times. And when I heard that, I'm just like, well, that could apply to psychology too, not just physical emergencies. And that's when I realized this is like that moment when Deep Blue beat Kasparov, right? Like they beat us at medicine now. So the arrows are pointing in a direction, and it's not going to stop anytime soon.
It is fascinating, and I think Ken has hit on the point that will make a difference. Once it can talk back to you, and it feels like it's a human talking back to you, then I think there's a new comfort level in actually taking advice from AI.
Yeah, I think so too. I think one day you're going to get a guest on your show, and it'll probably be right around April 1st. And after the end, they're going to say, by the way, hey, I'm over here on the side. That's my AI that you've been talking to. And you're going to be like, oh, it's happened. It's happened.
Yeah, it is fascinating how fast it has been moving. It just feels like at some point there was just a trigger, and it has exploded ever since. And it moves so fast now that I think what we're going to be able to do by this time next year, you and I probably haven't even thought well, maybe you're a bit smarter than me, Ken. I haven't even thought that it's possible. Not only have I not thought it's possible, I haven't even thought of it. It's so far advanced That thought hasn't even crossed my mind. And I feel like in 1 year, it's moving so fast. That's where we're going to be. That it's not that AI is going to be doing what we thought wasn't possible. AI is going to be doing what we didn't even think of.
Yeah. It's going to figure out the problems that we need to solve that we're not aware of that we need to solve. But here's what's really interesting about it. And this kind of circles back to what, the original intention of our conversation, which is podcasting is about, is AI has been around for a long time, but it's always been in labs and working with very technical people. So you got these really intelligent coders and data scientists and neuroscientists and, working out very complex mathematical issues and like creating unique chips just for this purpose. And it was moving quite slowly. And then Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he decided to say, hey, let's make a free version for the public. And that was scary. Just like, why, this is our most prized technology. Why would you do that? And I believe that his decision to do that is what made it grow like crazy for two reasons. Number one, they're getting feedback from non-techie people. All these people, like, what kind of questions are people actually asking it? How are people actually doing it? And what makes people feel that it's real? So now AI is learning a zillion times faster because they're no longer just interacting with the experts. They're interacting with regular humans. And the other thing, of course, is the funding that came as a result. More money, more research, more labs, more supercomputers. And so I think that in a sense, if you have, whether it's AI or business advice or any kind of technology that you hold so dear and near and only, give it to your paying customers or clients, and you feel like it's so precious that you can't share it. I think the opposite is true. The more you give away for free, the more valuable it becomes and the better it gets. And that's why on podcasts, short of the kind of private information I just give to my clients, because, of the specific work we're doing together, I share pretty much everything about how I do what I do publicly if people ask, if I feel it's interesting. And I think that kind of carries over from the way AI grew to the way an amazing idea can grow if that's something that you've got.
Yeah, how interesting is that too? And I'm sure you felt this, that you can give almost everything away because there's a very large gap in knowing and doing, and that's a gap most people can't or won't cross. So you can give everything away, and in the end, it won't matter.
But you will be remembered for it if it really is something that's useful.
It's been. Oh, I was just going to make one last comment of you will be remembered as smart and generous and an expert because you gave it all away. Yeah, but man, it's been great talking with you, Ken. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Likewise. I'd like to ask if there's just, let's say Rosie. Okay. Remember Rosie, right? Rosie's been listening to our podcast for, let's just say, at least 10 episodes. And she's thinking, you know what? I could talk about that better. I could do a better job than Ken. I should have asked that question, or he should interview me. But for some reason, something's holding her back from starting her own podcast. So what would you say to Rosie right now? She's a business owner, by the way, and let's say she consults people, other women, on how to start a stay-at-home business.
Oh, this is a great opportunity for Rosie. Probably, Rosie, what has held you back is not knowing where to start. Podcasting is easier than it's ever been. Sure, that means there's more podcasts than there's ever been, but there's no podcast with you talking to people. And sure, Ken has been at it a while. Ken has an audience that you don't, but Ken started from scratch too. And the one difference between you and Ken is you are Rosie, and there are people that will listen to you that won't listen to Ken. There are people that will like the way you say it better than the way Ken says it. There are people that only you can help. So you've just got to get started. When I started podcasting, I was terrible. My first episodes are still out there. I was not good. Well, after more than 2,000 episodes, I'm okay. It took time. It took showing up. It's an underrated skill. Showing up and doing something is underrated and has a way bigger return than you would expect. So that is my advice. Show up and do the work, and good things happen.
Hey, Jody, thanks so much for that advice. And for all the Rosies or Ronalds out there, I think that from somebody who's done over 2,000 episodes, for someone who's built not just, kind of used podcasting as a lightning rod to attract the right kind of people in a powerful way, I think that's a great piece of advice. And I wish I would have heard that from you earlier. Then I would have started my podcast earlier. Okay, let's wrap this up. Jody, thank you so much for being on the program. By the way, do you have any links to how people can get in touch with you, find out more about you, and things like that?
If you go to jodymaberry.com, there's a contact page. You can reach out, and please do reach out to me there. Plus, there is a tab on top that says podcast. Every podcast that I do is listed right there. So if whatever you're interested in, I probably have a podcast related to that. The Park Leader Show, the Jody Maberry Show, Creating Disney Magic. I do a daily podcast for college students, mainly because my son's a freshman in college. So there's so many shows. Just pick one. You might like it.
All right. So if you're listening on the podcast, then go down to the show notes. We'll put all the links there, which Jody, you'll send to me right after this. And if you're watching this on YouTube, check out the description. We'll have all the links there as well. And other than that, please do, if you got even one nugget out of this, which would be hard not to, then please do go and give some feedback on your favorite podcast platform. Just put one note there about what was your favorite thing about this, and give it as many stars as you think it deserves, which of course is 5. Other than that, we'll see you next week.
No hustle, worship here, we're a different breed. Action is what we got if action is what you need. Content capitalists, we're breaking the mold. Cause the old ways fade, new stories to be told. So content capitalists, get to the prize.